Welcome to Hearts and Minds, a podcast that will help you to discover the extraordinary in your everyday life. Whether it's in your work, relationships, or your spiritual life, we discuss topics of faith and life in a way to suit the unspiritual and devout alike. Wherever you are on your journey, this podcast should speak to you, and we are delighted that you are here. I am here today with Dr. Erika Bachiochi. Dr. Erika is an American legal scholar and a fellow of the Ethics and Public Policy Centre. She specialises in equal protection jurisprudence, feminist legal theory, Catholic social teaching and sexual ethics. She's also a senior fellow at the Abigail Adams Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where she founded and directs the Wollstonecraft Project. Erika is an author of numerous articles and books, including The Cost of Choice, Women, Sex and the Church, A Case for Catholic Teaching, and her most recent book, The Rights of Women, Reclaiming a Lost Vision. Erika has been married for over 20 years. She is a mum of 7 wonderful children. And you're very welcome, Erika, to our podcast on Hearts and Minds.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
So, having introduced you, Erika, for many, including myself, you sound like a Wonder Woman. Intelligent, successful, making an incredible impact, happily married to a wonderful man with 7 children. But your childhood and teen years were difficult, and you experienced your mother's 3 divorces, the suicide of 2 close friends. You were an addict as a teen. How did you get where you are today and inspire us all?
Yeah, that's a good question, I suppose, and a long answer. But I'll start with just the real significant way in which Alcoholics Anonymous changed my life at age 17. I got involved in 12-step programs and then started working the steps when I was 17, 18, 19. And it was through sort of the people in those rooms, especially really great women who kind of took me under their wing almost as, moms and grandma and all that, was really, really impacted me in a really positive way. They also taught me how to pray, which was really significant. I, hadn't been raised in a faith at all. I'd been baptized, a Catholic, had my first communion, but I didn't live in a household that practiced any faith at all. And so I didn't really know much about anything having to do with a life of prayer. And what was beautiful about AA is just really teaching me how to pray just to God as I understood God, to what they call, a higher power. It was very freeing for me. As one who at that point, especially as I entered college, really became very interested in questions of feminism, got really involved in the Women's Center on my college campus, took women's studies classes. And so at that point, really understood Christianity, especially Catholicism, as sort of, the most patriarchal of religions and all of that. I don't know that that's even true. There's, of course, other patriarchal religions, but it was something that I wasn't interested in all. And so learning how to pray and just really talk to God as a higher power was really, really important and powerful for me. And it's something that I did with, very religiously, you could say. I mean, I really prayed throughout the day, really talked to God in a kind of a very intimate way. I got on my knees by my bed as I was taught in AA before I, went to bed every night and asked for guidance. And I really tried to live by the disciplines of AA, that I would come to learn later were really influenced by Christianity, but just, trying to, do an examination of conscience, trying to, prayer and meditation, and then helping others. And that was a really important part, was trying to get out of my own self and my own sort of self-pity or my own, just kind of groveling, looking at my belly button all the time. And I had great sponsors who really said, stop taking your spiritual temperature and help another. And it was really a beautiful way to sort of focus outward and try to see others' problems and not just be so concerned about my own. And then, with my interest in, women's studies and all that, I think I just was really interested in kind of academic feminism, but then also feminist activism. But I started to really see that there was what I saw to be a contradiction. And this is because of my experience as a teenager and kind of the, actions I did under the influence of alcohol with boys that were not healthy for me at all, emotionally healthy, really caused a lot of, I would say, emotional turmoil in me. And so when I heard the feminists of that time, in my classes and all that, linking together freedom and equality, which all seemed wonderful to me, with kind of a free love orientation or orientation around the sexual revolution, sort of casual sex culture on campus and all of that, it just seemed like it didn't quite fit for me. So I was already intellectually kind of pushing back against some of that. And then I, met the Catholic worker movement at a lecture on campus. So for those of you who aren't, don't know about the Catholic worker movement, it's a movement here in the United States, which was started by Dorothy Day, who is, it's really interested in caring for the poor and the disadvantaged. She started hospitality houses where they would really go out kind of to the margins and help those who really needed help caring for children, getting work and all of that. And so hearing about, that the Catholic worker movement was really something that really interested me. And so it made me more open to kind of the truth claims of Christianity, to the Christians on campus, many of whom became my friends who I would argue with from a feminist position all the time. And that was a really beautiful, beautiful time. And then just fast forward to changing my major to political science, political philosophy, starting to study ancient philosophy like Plato and Aristotle. And then eventually decided to go and study theology in grad school. And then I went to law school. And I never, throughout this whole time, lost my interest in women's issues and kind of feminism, and really the way in which I define feminism is kind of, a movement that really, is thinking about the distinctive needs and interests of women as women, and really got interested in the history of feminism and the history of women's rights.
Fascinating. And of course, you could kick back against sort of the theory and the difference between theory and reality, so effectively, like so many others. For many who have had difficult childhoods, recovery and healing, Erika, can seem out of reach. But you've just described there, your experience with AA, your experience of, you might say, the healing power of relationships in your life, the support you received from people. And you've described it beautifully as loved you back to emotional and spiritual health, which is just such a beautiful and extraordinary way of describing human relationships. Can you tell us a bit about that and how you learned to trust, after having been, you might say, let down so often by others at a young age?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there's a way in which being part of AA was really, it's self-healing. Apart from the steps and doing all of that, just that there were people there who literally were just unknown to me otherwise, right? In some sense, strangers on the street who were there, come together, and then would just pour out hours of time spending time with me with they had no interest in it. Of course it was, I guess, helping to keep themselves sober too, but it was just like a sharing and a really, a friendship with another that I thought was really, really beautiful. But then also that concern was really, as I say, kind of re-parenting me. And one of the things that came to pass during that time was I listened to something like a podcast. It wasn't a podcast. It was on a little tape that I put into my tape recorder at that point in the mid-1990s. And it was all about this idea of God the Father re-parenting. And I just thought, this was really interesting to me as someone who didn't grow up with a father, who had, as my mom had these, 3 different husbands. So I had a stepfather for a period of time. And so it was just like I had learned, I guess, maybe at that point, a little bit about how the absence of fathers in girls' lives especially was hard on them, that there were a lot of significant sort of indicators that showed kind of the way I'd lived was it seemed to me to be traced back to, not having this, my father in my life. And so I did this simple prayer and just asking God to reparent me. And it was just this series of things that happened in my life, upon recollection, maybe, a little bit later, that was really, really helpful. And the first was in college, I became really good friends with this wonderful man who was very seriously committed to another woman back at home. It was like his high school sweetheart. And so we were able to have this great friendship without there being any kind of possibility of romance. That was really, really healing for me. I think to be kind of loved, but platonically in some way, but really loved as a true friend by a man was really helpful. And then I had this occasion to live with my own father because it's a long story, but my mom went off with her third husband to live in Holland. In the Netherlands for a brief time, 3 or 4 years. And so I went as a college student to live with my own father. And he had, by that time, years before, had remarried to this really wonderful woman. And just getting to know him again. My mom and dad had been divorced when I was 4, and I'd see him a little bit. But he's this really wonderful, wonderful man who himself had committed to helping others in his profession, working with at-risk kids. And so it was just like getting to have that relationship, getting a chance to have that relationship again was also really healing. And then I just had a period of really trying to focus on kind of my own spiritual growth and my own prayer and not romance and those kinds of things. And so having a period of time where I took, it was actually Lent. By that time I had come back into the Catholic Church. And so it was a time during Lent, during those 40 days when I was really spending time giving my heart to God, that was really, really healing for me. And then, it's just I'm blessed to have this man as a husband and then have these beautiful children who have also been really healing for me. I know that family can sometimes be really hard, as I experienced growing up, but I've just had this, just lucked out, I guess, with this, this incredible man who has been incredibly tender and forgiving. And so for the first 10 years of our marriage was probably pretty hard for him because I had to be forgiven a lot just for just being, just having to heal. And he just stood by and was so stable. And he wasn't perfect, of course, but that was really beautiful. And then as a mother, just getting to kind of love another and really give myself to, vulnerable, dependent children, was really beautiful. There's no other way of putting it, that there's just something about the way I learned in AA, in those little instances where I got out of myself to help another, just became like a way of life in motherhood. And it's something that I think, generations have known how important both motherhood and fatherhood is to maturing, to maturation in adults. It's something I think we've kind of forgotten, but has certainly been true in my own life. And so as I was able to trust kind of my own husband, and then also trust God in the way in which he kind of bestowed many blessings in my life, even amidst, lots of hardship too. Having 7 children is no easy task, right? So there's a lot of hard parts. There was just a lot of blessing in it and a lot of gifts and a lot of spiritual guidance. So I think that's how I guess I learned to trust and to really, be loved. And then therefore love others, for sure.
That's beautiful. Obviously, naturally, we do appreciate the thing of needing to be loved, to love back, but it's a constant, isn't it? Listening to you there, Erika, what strikes me is that you're somebody who doesn't see obstacles. There's a certain fearlessness about the way you approach life and your sort of, your zest for life. Where did you get that from, do you think?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember in high school, there was this boy who was just a funny boy. But I remember he had this really thick. I grew up in Maine, which is in New England, kind of the northern tip of the United Northeast. And he had a very thick Maine accent, and he said, "You're so audacious. You're so audacious." And I kind of held that I am kind of audacious. So you're right. You've pinned me there. I have a best friend introduced me once as relentless, and I think that's true. Somehow, I don't know, I can point to my own parents who both have kind of that quality, that kind of intensity in everything that they do. My dad, very successful football coach who really changed a lot of lives in his town. And my mom, despite, her not being so good at marriage, has just an incredible work ethic, incredible kind of desire to sort of live hard, I guess is the way to put it. And all that, it's just, I don't know. I guess I would say that's all true, but it also isn't always a good thing.
Well, like everything in life, I suppose.
Yeah. And so our virtues can be, can also lend to sort of excesses. And I think that's why having the team of my husband has been so good, because I guess, maybe I enliven his life and he kind of holds me down as a rock so I don't fly away. And it's been a great and beautiful thing. And actually now having teenagers sort of reflect my intensity back to me has been also very interesting. They all have a great love of life and are doing really cool things. But it's, they're all back now. All my college students are back, and our house is very loud and full with lots of argument and intensity. So it's a very full life. But I think that must be where it comes from, is maybe my own parents.
Well, it's lovely. It's that just love for life, which is very palpable. You mentioned there about your kids, and fearful parenting is something many parents are familiar with, whether it's helicopter parenting or lawnmower parenting or whatever the version people talk about. But how did you foster your kids' independence and at the same time their care for each other?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one that is asked of me all the time, because I do have these really great kids. So it's almost like I always think, like, you've heard my story, it's kind of despite me that they've come to be these incredible people. And I think, it's really, I guess I can say, and I think they've said this back to me, that part of it has been because of my own struggle and knowing how much I need God's grace, and knowing how much I need to spend time in prayer and meditation every day to be able to, be a joyful person, to have peace and all that because I learned that at such a young age, at 17, really really knowing that I needed to put God first in my life and put that desire for peace in my life really early, that I learned these habits that I can't go many days without really praying very intentionally and sitting in prayer and making sure I have beautiful spiritual reading, and that I'm edified, by those who are much wiser than I am. That I think all of that has helped them to see and helped me to teach them that we're all really imperfect, and that we all need a lot of guidance, and that we need to, I apologize to my kids when I speak harshly to them, or when I judge them incorrectly. I try to apologize right away. That is something that is a great gift, because I know a lot of people have a hard time, they're stubborn and they don't want to say they're sorry and all that. But it's been something that has been really helpful for me, and to just teach them, I guess, that we're all imperfect. And so we really to strive for a beautiful relationship with, the God who will never disappoint, who can always be there for them, who loves them totally unconditionally. Of course, I love my children as unconditionally as I can, but because, we all have our faults. And I think that has given them, their own freedom to just really have a relationship with God and become whoever, again, just kind of be docile in that way. And also, though, to know, having a big family, it's built in that you need to care about each other and that you need to share. And so that's one thing that I say to mothers and fathers of small children is, it seems like a time that is you just have to get through it because it's so hard and all that. But I just think it was hard for me. It was much harder. I love having teenagers, love having teenagers and adults, but small, and 10, 9, 8-year-olds, those are super fun. But young children are really hard after the baby age, when you're just nurturing and all that. And 2, 3, 4, just the intentionality of all those small habits of manners and table manners and saying please and thank you and making sure they're not taking toys from others, really being intentional about all those things. It's so important to their character, because they start to see that they're not the center of the universe, which is, I think, really important. And then, having a discipline that's consistent, it doesn't have to be, I really believe in a lot of freedom. My husband is more of a disciplinarian. This is kind of maybe how it works in different relationships, but I think one of the I'll tell a last thing that I say to my kids as they're growing up is, when we're at the dinner table and they're just acting like animals, I point it out. And I say, so you can be more like an animal, or you can be more like a human being. And, you've been given this beautiful gift of freedom to become excellent and to, create habits and of virtue and excellence so that you can be someone for others. who's a great friend and a great spouse and a great all these other things. But you've got to work on those habits now, because we can decide just that we want to be animals and live according to those kind of what the ancients called the lowest parts of us, or we can live according to the highest part of us, which is our reason, which is, what God gives us is like being in his image and likeness. And I think that's been something that's helpful to them, is that they don't want to be just animals. They want to be humans, like live as the fullest humans they can be. And that's been really beautiful to see unfold, I guess, and just have a wonder at your children, and not try to like make them cookie cutters of something, but just like they're all their own, and just to really love like what is really unique in each of them. I'm going to say one more thing, because I love it about what we do at birthdays, where we have a big family, right? But we each go around and we say what we love, something that we love that we've noticed in that other person throughout the year, some growth, some gift, some obstacle that they've overcome. And we each say, like, and even our college students, we get them on the phone when it's somebody's birthday, and we share something that we love about the other. And I think it's really like, you can see it's kind of the love of the other becomes really palpable in those times. And it's a really beautiful way to share birthdays, I think.
That's beautiful. And Erika, you have referred as well, but to your own marriage. But how has it provided a training ground for developing virtues? I'm sure you've wonderful examples.
Yeah, it's been. Yeah, I mean, I think humility really is the queen of the virtues. I think that's really true, and so humility and forgiveness has to be at the core of every marriage. It has to be, and so even if it's hard for one spouse or the other, to really try to emulate that as best we can, so that I just notice like it comes easier for me than it does for my husband. But the more that I shouldn't say humility comes easier for me. That is not true. I struggle with pride a lot. But the forgiveness comes easier for me. And I just really think that's from habits when I was a kid. And so I just try to do that. And he also, he's so good at listening. And it's just like trying to see, again, just like we do with our kids, like the beauty in the other. I think for women, there's a way that we can treat our husbands as one of the children. And I think there's, to have a deep respect for all that he brings, uniquely, but then as a man, I think has been really important for me. I'm kind of a commander, and I have a big presence in our family. He's much quieter. And so sometimes I have to like settle like the family to be able to like listen to their father. And I think that's been really important for my own children's respect of their dad, because he is so wise. And as they get older, the girls have come, my older girls who are now in college, come to see like the wisdom of their dad. But it's been really important for me not to be like, like just taking over every aspect, to really allow that quiet wisdom that he has to be something that is very important in our family. And so it's like giving him more of a voice, I guess, as someone who tends to have a voice that comes easily.
Wonderful. Moving on to another topic, I suppose, of work, having a large family like you have, Erika, and a very successful career. How did you combine motherhood with such, professional work? It's challenging for any woman. Was it challenging for you? Or did it come easy? Would you share with us some thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things that I always say that's kind of unique about my work is that it's very, very, very flexible. So I've never been beholden to a boss. And I really took advantage of the times when I was raising small children to rely on my husband's salary. And we were able to do that through a lot of, being really frugal, but also because he earns a good living, to, really lean into the reading, and kind of, I always think of it as like, I was like a mother academic without really producing much for a long time. But I read and read and read and read. And then when I'd be moved, I would write. And the writing would just be kind of, I wouldn't like write as a journalist writes like all the time, or have like some deadline I had to get to. I would write as I was nourished by my reading. And so it allowed me to write things that had more depth, I think, because of the way in which I was being enriched by my own work as a mother. And so the care that I was giving to my children and my relationships, it just was able to kind of overpour into my scholarship and into the work I was doing. I was already trained as a lawyer. I was already trained, with a master's degree in sort of theology, philosophy, and all that. And so there was a lot that I could do in my work, but I just allowed it to be slow and to take the time it needed to. I mean, a lot of women don't have that privilege that I had. And it really is a privilege to kind of live the life of the mind at that time for about 10 years. I mean, I was really mainly at home with my children, and yet sort of keeping my hand in all these, keeping like more than a toe, more like a full leg into the scholarship. And then, so I was able to edit a couple books at that time, was able to do some law review articles, but I was working like 5-10 hours a week, but really focused on that. And then reading, I shouldn't say that because I was reading other times. So when my children would be playing, I was always reading, pushing swings. I would literally be reading feminist legal, feminist law journal articles while I was pushing swings. So always very much an intellectual, but my kids grew up with me reading. And the way I've kind of named that is the duty of the moment, that at different times we have different capacities, and like, what are the duties I have now? And some, and it's also like our own capacities for a lot of, balancing. Some people have very orderly minds and so are able to kind of keep up with a lot of different things at once. And some people don't, but have like a desire for beauty and beautification. They really want to make their homes really beautiful. That's not something I'm very good at, or do I really care much about? I have a pretty utilitarian home that's just functional. So, I mean, I think all these things, it just kind of depends on your vocation and the gifts and all that you have. As my children got older and we were paying for schools, I needed to spend more time in work because I needed to earn money for our family. Now I work full time and have to earn a full time salary because my kids are in college, and in the United States, college is very expensive. And so it did turn out really well for me. I mean, I think it's much harder for women who are wage laborers, who really have to work when their children are very young, who aren't able to take a lot of time off. And that's a problem with our system. It's something that I've really, in my own work, tried to give an account of really deep philosophical reasons why we shouldn't be structuring work in this way, building upon the work of others as well. So it's really tragic, I think, when mothers and fathers who really want to be caring for their own children have to give them to other adults to have to care for large hours, many hours in a day, when they really want to be doing some of that care themselves. And so that's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and wanted to give sort of others the privilege that I've had, even if they don't have a lot of resources, to do that with some, with the community pitching in as we should, because parents are doing something good for all of us, and so we should be helping them.
Super. As a senior academic, Erika, you mentor a lot of young women thinkers, making their way in a very competitive world. The academic world is very competitive, as we know. Is supporting other younger women something you feel strongly about?
Yes, very much so. So even though I have had a really an academic kind of track that is pretty unusual, I do mentor women who have a pretty normal academic track, who are, finishing their doctorates or their law degrees, and they're going right into the world of work. And so thinking with them about questions of marriage and family life and how they want to, consider doing all that has been really important. It's amazing how much they ask me those questions rather than questions about like publishing and, writing articles and all those kinds of things. But it's been a great joy to help with that. We also at the Wollstonecraft Project have had a fellowship for a scholar, mother, or father. We haven't had a father yet, but someone who's mainly working with their children in their home, caring for their children in the home, but has, a terminal degree, a PhD or whatever, and wants to keep doing that good work. And so we've been able to give fellowships of a significant amount of money each year for them to be working on books or articles and that. And that's been a very unique thing. I hope more others do that kind of thing too.
Fantastic. Just jumping back a little bit to what you were talking there about, the need for people in our lives, whether it's, the significant other or your children, or supporting people who are trying to bring up a family and at the same time make ends meet and etc., or just to maintain a career to some degree. You argue in your article, Embodied Caregiver, that humans are more interdependent than we give them credit for and less autonomous. Almost like as if, autonomy is the gold standard, and any kind of dependence, be it interdependent or not, is something of a lesser value. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that they're great goods of, the desire for agency, to be a protagonist in your own life, discern your own vocation and all of that. And individuals being unique, that's important. But there is kind of interdependency at the base of that we, don't kind of enter society as individuals and then, sort of start creating relationships. Really, we're born into families. We start as interdependent, and we are interdependent both at the beginnings and endings of life, and sickness, and all the other needs, and just in friendships and any relationships we have, there is an interdependence. And so I think trying to pay attention to that more as well, and just knowing that those foundations are the basis for any agency that we have, because we always are learning from others. We are raised in our parents or whoever gave us the virtues to be able to care for one another, to do our own work. So autonomy, any type of agency, requires interdependence first. And so we really need to be focusing, I think, more on that.
Absolutely. No, very, very, very true. Just wanted to jump topic a little bit. You once described yourself as a socialist feminist, and that you agree with a lot of feminist legal arguments. And this has led you to challenge conservatives who are inclined to just, as you say, shout no, and so miss the underlying maybe rationale for other feminists. Can you tell us a little bit more about this ability you seem to have to be able to help others to dialogue?
Yeah, so I wouldn't call myself a socialist feminist anymore, just to clarify. Kind of call myself a sex-realist feminist. Have been kind of part of a new group, a growing group of women who are calling themselves sex-realist feminists, part of helped to start this journal called Fair Disputations, which I would send your listeners to, FAIRER disputations.com, where a lot of feminists, who take seriously embodiment and sexual difference and the needs of women, are all sort of gathering together and writing. It's been really exciting. So, I mean, I think that the desire I have had for dialogue obviously comes from my own past, from being sort of on other sides of issues than I am now, for really growing and learning from other people. I have sort of an insatiable intellectual curiosity. I just have a lot of wonder about, where kind of the questions that animate people. And so I think that that's partly it. I mean, I just want to, take sort of where we are as humans, and that there's a lot of commonalities that we have as humans, kind of our own imperfections and vulnerabilities, and really sort of meet there and then sort of understand where someone comes from and start there. And I think it's been something really a privilege for me to really talk to people with whom I disagree, to try to learn from them, but then also try to help them maybe understand where I'm coming from as well. It's been really actually a lot of fun for me.
and interestingly enough, you mentioned there how you like to reach the person where they're at. But you've also been described as representing the third way. You've an ability to foster difficult conversations and obviously journey with the person. So you're not afraid, typically, which some people would be, that dialogue means you lose ground and somehow you step away from what you value or what you hold true. Can you tell us just a little bit about that, about being a bridge and how you're not fearful of journeying with people?
Yeah, I mean, I just find, I don't know, there's just, people are really fascinating, generally have, when you dig deep enough, there's more commonality in people than you would think. I mean, even in the way that I talk a lot about duties of care we have for one another. And it's been something that it's amazing to me, but that I found that both in America, except for like the far hardcore libertarians on either side of the political aisle, that most people think that we owe duties of care to one another. On both left and right. And so it's a place where, like, what are those duties and what does care look like? And all of that has been something that's been really edifying for me, I think.
Super.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about in terms of being fearful. I mean, that's one of the ways that prayer comes in, is that I just really want like charity and love of the other to lead, and so I know that I'm not really capable of that on my own, and so I really try to ask God to really inform conversations, really try to pray before conversations, just so that I can come from a place of peace and love for the other. And to my mind, I found that that's very hard to do just as like, me in my own, with my own qualities. Like I really need kind of a divine presence for that.
That's fantastic. One last question, Erika. You believe that women in particular are often able to view a person's development in a way that goes, as you say, straight to the heart. And for that reason, women must be central in engaging the culture in all its facets. Often women may not feel very important or even articulate to engage with culture. Yeah, I'm typically thinking of women sometimes, who've stepped back maybe from their professional work for a while and they're bringing up children and they kind of get the pregnancy fog and then wonder, am I able to go back into the workplace, et cetera, et cetera. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I just think we have to bloom where we're planted. It's just, I think one of the things that women can do sometimes is we really are at risk for comparing ourselves with other women. And I think this whole idea of the duty of the moment and just really being where we are at that time and recognizing how all of the gifts we have, whatever they are, and all of the vulnerabilities too, like that they can be of use, that we can really, bless and edify and help and nourish and nurture all those around us wherever we are, whatever kind of phase and season of life we're in. So, one of the things historically that I think is really important to note is the way in which women outside the workplace, especially prior to the Industrial Revolution, but even during, the time I study quite a bit is the 19th century, that women who were not engaged in remunerative work, wage earning work, were the ones kind of the mover and shakers of culture, the ones who, in the American context, the westward expansion were the ones who came and built, said where the libraries were going to go and the churches and the way in which like bringing families together, building solidarity among people is something that women historically have always done. So the fact that someone is out of the workplace can be a great privilege to do that. When I had that time when I was raising small children, I helped to found a school. This is incredible. Wow. With other moms. That school started with 25 children, is now, once I stepped back, so I was involved in it for the first 2 years. It was like 2 of the hardest years of my life in a lot of ways. Once we stepped back and kind of let the professionals take over, that school has grown into 250 children. It's just like the way in which we can seed things. With another mom, I started a camp for young children for our own children, since we had so many. And then we brought in other families who we wanted our children to spend time with. We kind of rested after our children got older. Well, some of my own children have taken that camp and have restarted it. And now they have, in the summer, they have a summer camp that they run. And so that was all because I had the freedom from the workplace, the freedom to do things that I think, sometimes those who don't have that privilege aren't able to do. And that is like building community that we all need. It's also supporting women who are working, who need to work or have vocation to work. We have a lot of women in my own community now who we help each other, with our children. We have a woman in the community who's a physician who many of us see for our children. And so it's like helping one another to do their vocations well. Whether it's having one child and working 40 hours a week, whether it's having none, whatever it is, like it's helping other women to fulfill their vocations and other families to fulfill their needs, and like joining together as raising children together has been a beautiful thing that I think you can kind of do and lend support to wherever people women are in the seasons of their lives.
That's beautiful. I love the way you talk. You've talked a lot about that idea of the duty of the present and the contrast between that attitude and comparison. And how when you step away from that, that whole sense of building community and solidarity with others can come front and central. Well, Erika, we've had a wonderful conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it. You're a busy mom and you're a busy academic. So I want to thank you for your time, for making the time to be with us on Hearts and Minds. And then to our listeners, thank you for joining us. And as always, I ask you to send through any comments or suggestions for future topics that you'd like to hear. And we will be including in the resource list at the end of today's podcast many of the wonderful articles, books, podcasts, etc. that Erika has mentioned. So thank you.